Yo, goons, what's good? Today, I figured I would make a Goldlewis mix-up guide, just talking about everything from his basic mix-ups to his advanced quote-unquote mix-ups. They're not very hard to pull off, but nonetheless, they're very hard to block. And I just wanted to say before getting into it that I do have my input, little controller on down there, so you can follow along with my inputs when I say like a numerical notation for a BT. All right, also, I'm going to be assuming the opponent's always FDing just to show that these mix-ups are so strong that even work against FD, and against non-FD, they're basically all at least as strong, if not stronger. Okay, so that being said, let's get into it, starting at some of Goldlewis's easiest and most common and basic mix-ups. So the first mix-up I wanted to talk about is going to be off of 684. Basically what you're going to do is you're going to PRC in, and during the PRC flash, you're going to buffer either 862 or 842. Those are your high-low Behemoth Typhoons. And because the opponent is Guard Crush here, they can't YRC, they can't reversal, they can't do anything, they just have to hold this high-low during the PRC. And even though these inputs start with an up, during your dash RC, you can't jump. So you have plenty of time to input the 862, and that's gonna be kind of Goldlewis's most basic mix-up and pressure tool. Remember that 862 is plus 12, and 842 is plus 16. So even if these get blocked, you're gonna be left in a good position, and even if they land, you're also gonna be left in a good position, because that means you get either a combo in the case of 842, or just good Oki in the case of 862. Or just damage in general, right? So that's going to be a strong basic mix-up that Goldlewis has access to, and also probably his most common one. So the next most common mix-up that I'd say Goldlewis is go for, and that is also very, very strong, is going to be his left-right mix-up. So let me just show you what I mean first, before I say what the options are. So there's a reason I'm doing these near the corner, and it's because both of these options side switch. And what you'll get often is like a close knockdown next to the corner. Doesn't even have to be that close. And you're going to go for this side switching mix up. 248, this BT actually side switches on hit. And if you're near enough to the corner, you can get a full, little mini combo off this. And it's really, really good. But either way, you're gonna put the opponent in the corner off of this mix-up. And there's also one other component of the left-right, which is the fake cross-up. That looks something like this. So you give them enough time to see that you're going to try going for the JH, then you IAD back JK, and buffer a BT. I like to do air 684. And that's very strong as a round ender. All of these mix-ups are strong as round enders, actually, because if you have meter, even a little baby conversion gets you mumbo damage here. Obviously, Soul doesn't have guts on when I do that, but you get the idea, right? It's very, very strong. So after Goldlewis's left-right mix-up, I want to talk a little bit about his tick throw game. So let's go ahead and set Soul here to 5k on block, just to demonstrate that these tick throws can't be mashed. A little bit of theory here, but if you didn't know, after block and after wake-up, characters have a 5-frame throw invulnerability window. But for whatever reason, Guard Crush just eliminate, like it's gone. That window does not exist with Guard Crush. So if you're coming out of Guard Crush frames, your throw invulnerability is gone, which lets Goldlewis catch moves and options under 5 frames with his tick throws. Obviously not backdash, because that's frame 1. And of course you can always jump out of tick throws. But it is pretty ridiculous what he can do here. So let me give you some examples of where you're going to be going for this. So one of those would be off of a 486 if you're close enough. 486 is super plus 15 to plus 14, depending on the opponent, their height and whatnot. So it's really, really, really good. You don't even have to be that close because it's so plus. Another example of that would be 842. So this is plus 16. Omega plus, the opponent's never going to mash out of that tick throw. That one in particular, I get people a lot with. What you're going to start to see here is that you can start meshing Goldlewis's mix-ups together. And that creates some very devastating and hard to block pressure. So, for example, earlier I showed you the PRC high-low. You can combine that with the tick throw, and it just becomes impossible to block. And of course, the tick throw is sort of a strike throw mix-up, because you can also catch mashing in those instances with just throwing out another button because you're so plus. So it's just really, really strong, and a reason why these tick throws work so often. Another one you can go for is off of the high. This is plus 12. So, of course, that's also going to be really hard to mash out of. And another very common spot is going to be off of a meaty 268. Let's try that again. You do want to make sure it hits meaty, though, right? As I did there, it hit in the later part of the frame, of the animation, excuse me, because if you hit in the early part like this, it's only going to be plus 3, and that's not going to be enough to get a tick throw, at least on Soul. A lot of times, this tick throw will still work. A lot of the time, this tick throw will still work. But just know that it's not entirely true. Similarly, in the left-right mix-up, if you go for the right option, I suppose, it side switches, which is going to be 2, 4, 8, it's also only plus 3. But oftentimes, you're going to get away with a tick throw here, because you can frame trap mashing with your 2P in this case. So it's kind of going to deter people from mashing there. Although some buttons will low profile your 2P and beat your next fastest option, which is 2K, or at least clash with it. So that's going to be stuff like Axel 2K, Happy Chaos 2K, and just a lot of other options in general. Just ignore my inputs right now. So continuing in the spirit of meshing together Goldlewis's mix-ups, next I want to talk a little bit about his disgusting corner OTG pressure. First of all, let's stop Soul from mashing on us here for a second. I know that's hard. Let's say you hit a throw in the corner off of a tick throw. You can go for this. And this pressure is nasty, 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 right? So what I'm doing here is I'm using OTG 2K in order to buffer a slightly delayed 862 or 842, which is going to be your high-low mix-up. And on hit, you can kind of just keep looping this into itself until you get a splat. And then what will splat basically is just a single hit of this BT. So you have low combo proration when you input super after that. And you're just going to get a dummy amount of damage as a result. I try to keep track of the cumulative damage there. It's crazy. You get so much. Look at his HP. Look at that. It is so strong. And again, even if they block, right? You are at worst plus 12 in this case. At worst. And you're going to be pushed back a little bit here, so going for tick throws can be a little risky. But it's still strong, because the opponent is not going to expect to go to block another tick throw there. And just mixing together these options is extremely strong. And even if you don't go for tick throw, you can add in the other mix-ups we already talked about, right? You can start RCing in and going for the high-low there. And again, you're going to be left with plus frames. Even if all your mix-ups fail, you're going to have lots of plus frames. That is why Goldlewis pressure, in a nutshell, is so hard to deal with, on top of just being extremely oppressive. Let's also talk about resource-assisted mix outside of meter, of course. I'm talking about drone and the beam. Starting with drone, a really good spot where you can throw in a mix-up is going to be off of a knockdown in the corner, typically a throw. What you're just going to do is place down your level 3 drone and jump forward, and during that jump, you can buffer the high-low 862 or 842. And this setup is completely reversal safe. It is YRC safe, because if you didn't know, you cannot YRC level 3 drone. Moreover, if you're doing this properly, when you jump forward, you hold back to block, which will make sure that any reversals or, mashing shenanigans just don't even trade with you. You'll just block them and the drone will pick them up and you can combo off of it. But this is really great because, again, you're getting a high-low here, and it's guaranteed. The opponent has to hold it. They can't YRC. Also, when you jump forward and you hold back, the purpose is there to kind of serve as a burst bait, so make sure you're doing the back input while you're jumping in, because you can actually get gold bursted there. You can also go for some drone mix mid-screen, so if you get a close enough knockdown, maybe you can run up and drone, and during the drone you can buffer the high-low, but a lot of the time this kind of thing is going to be backdashable, or it's not going to be fully reversal or gold burst safe, so just keep that in mind. But I have to say I do still go for this a lot of the time mid-screen, so it's definitely strong. So the reason I showed this setup with level 3 drone is because if you try it with level 2 drone and you go for the 842, the low option, which is plus 16, so very rewarding on block. That's why I prefer to go for it in this setup unless you're going to get a kill with meter on the overhead. But it can actually be mashed out of with level 2 drone because level 2 drone has a lot less block stun and just total duration than level 3 drone. So they're Soul 2Ping me. I mean, generic 5-framers will get you out here. I think there might even be more than a 5-frame gap. I don't know the exact numbers, but But just bear in mind that in general, level 2 drone is going to give you a much weaker mix. So yeah. So next, let's talk a little bit about the beam super. So this is double quarter circle forward K, and this actually got buffed in the most recent patch in that the startup is faster. So what used to happen a lot of the time is you use this and you'll just get whacked in the middle of it. The opponent will run up and hit you, and there goes your meter and your turn, because they can actually run past that beam and just avoid it that way. But if you have level 3 security, the drone lasts for much longer, and so it's a lot harder for them to run past. You can see it will bring a cell all the way to me nearly. And a lot of the time the opponent will still recklessly run in while this is out, so it doesn't hurt to throw out like a 624 or 684 while they're coming toward you, because you get a lot of frames to work with during the super. So just stopping them early to block or even get hit, because the super will give you a little combo if you do hit that raw, is pretty good. But you can actually use this as a mix-up opportunity. So there are a few different things you can go for, but most of it is going to be more of the same. It's going to be high-low and left-right. Like that. And of course you can do the air dash back JK there. And of course, since they're in so much block stun, you have time to go for a close slash 842, 862. It's not entirely necessary to car cancel this. One, because normally you car cancel these in order to get around backdash. And even though FD beats close slash 842, because the beam is dragging them in, it will work when you have the beam out. And that's just really, really nice. So a lot of people will question whether or not beam is worth it when you can just get a level 3 drone out and then use your meter for an additional mix-up while the drone's doing the work for you. But at a high enough level, approaching with drone from full screen in certain matchups is really difficult. And actually some characters can just straight up nullify drone. And in particular, if the characters have meter that can nullify drone, like Baiken and Kai, there are tons of characters that can just delete meter using their own supers and even convert themselves into an advantage state. So the beam is worth using against those, and also against characters that just normally have very good answers for it. Like Happy Chaos, if you didn't know, can just completely ignore drone more or less. If they play it properly, they have to burn a few bullets, but nonetheless. Jacko can use her minions and put up the shield, and for whatever reason that deletes drone. Obviously Zato with a pose. Lots of other examples too. Axel can be a good example where you want to get in a lot as Goldlewis, but even getting in with drone is difficult against a good enough Axel player. Like a lot of the time you'll see JS into Rainwater, and that is actually really hard to contest because it hits at an angle where Goldlewis's air-to-air will also whiff, and so if you're not close to begin, if you're trying to get a drone out full screen, it's pretty difficult. So the advantages to using the beam super are definitely there. So the next thing is also going to be very niche, and this is Goldlewis's fake high-low. So if you didn't know, 862 and 842 are completely, like, perfectly inverted versions of the same move. So if I do 862 facing the right, that is essentially the exact same animation as doing 842 facing the left. They're basically just flipped images of one another. And what that means is you can do this really stupid cross-up where you buffer 862 and make it so that the move comes out just before you land. And what happens is if you cross up the opponent during that time, for whatever reason, it gives you the opposite BT on the side that you're now on. So in other words, if I do an 862 facing the right, but I cross him up during that time, I'm going to get an 862 as though I was facing the left, but it's going to look like an 842 if I were facing the right. That might sound a little confusing, but I can show you exactly what I mean. So there's what I mean, right? That looked like an 842, but he blocked it high. And you can also mix this in with doing normal 842 as if you were facing the left, the side that you're crossing up with. In that case, you just delay it a little bit. But the timing is a little bit strict on this. What I like to do is hold up forward, and then just as I'm about to land, go forward and then down and press H in order to get the high. Like that. And this is truly ambiguous. I will grant that it is theoretically possible to learn to react to these BTs 862 and 842. Very hard, because the effective startup on 862 is like 20 frames, and on 842 it's 24, and they don't have big visual indicators like tap dust. And there are also other options around that time that will frame trap you if you're trying to do things preemptively, like Kara 268 for example, and that will give you a huge bombo on counter hit. But the way that you set up this mix-up can be a little bit tricky. A lot of the time you're going to need level 3 drone, and a lot of the time you're going to be sacrificing a little bit of damage in your combo for additional Oki. So for example, a regular full conversion might look like this. But if you want to have time to set up the drone Oki, a good rule of thumb is to end on this 486, and then you go for the mix-up. Right, you end on the close slash 2H 486. This VT. You can go for this off of certain normal knockdowns too, as long as you're in a range where you can get the drone Oki out like right in front of them. But just be aware that this setup can be a little bit strange sometimes, the way it interacts with opponent wake up options. Like I've found, if you have the dummy set to mashing 6p on wake up, it can be really weird. A lot of the time you can get grabbed as well if you don't space this properly. But I just want to let you know that this is like a truly ambiguous mix-up. This one is impossible to distinguish whether or not you're going to get high or low. And especially if you have meter on Goldlewis and extending your combo won't be enough to kill, then setting up this mix-up and then RCing, hitting it, or even going for the fuzzy is very strong. Because, of course, you actually do get an overhead there, which means you can go for a fuzzy. Yeah. But this mix is kind of forbidden. I don't recommend going for this all the time, but it is useful if you want to pull out some tech. Now let's get into the advanced so-called mix-ups. So the reason I call these advanced mix-ups is because the inputs are definitely a little bit tougher, and the timings can be a lot tougher as well. But I mean, just lab these out and you should be able to get them consistently. The first of which is going to be the same high-low pressure from before, which is very easy to execute. Except now we are going to fast RC those. So something like this. Just note that when you fast RC these options, you are going to need a little bit less space than if you were going to do the regular PRC flash like this. Mostly just because 842 doesn't hit very far in front of Goldlewis. For example, even if they're FDing and you do close slash 842, it will just completely whiff. So if I go for something like this, it won't work. A little bit too far, right? Which is why I was doing it before. And if you do this early enough in your plus frames, you can get it to be completely gapless, which is very strong. So that would be the first mix-up I wanted to talk about here. The second would be getting into 6-6 BRC pressure. And what I mean by that is close slash dash cancel BRC stuff. So you get a lot of plus frames there, and you can use that to go for some very strong mix-ups on Goldlewis. So let me have Soul stop mashing here for a second. And the first mix-up I wanted to demonstrate is going to be as follows. I'm going to say it first. It's close slash 6-6 BRC, 862, which is this Behemoth Typhoon, and then fuzzy JKJD. So, like this. And the reason why that mix-up is so strong is because, first of all, if you're fast enough, the close slash 6-6 BRC 862 is gapless. And then you get a fuzzy overhead on top of that because of the extra plus frames from the blue RC and the opponent being forced to stand if they block the 862. And if they don't block the 862, because of the blue RC slowdown, you get a full combo from it. Normally, you do not get a combo off of 862 on hit, but in this case, you do. So that makes it a strong and rewarding mix-up, and it looks something like this. And the way you'll know you're doing that right is if you have the opponent set to FD and your JK actually connects after the 862. If it doesn't connect, that means you didn't get the fuzzy. But just know that getting this set up to properly be gapless is really difficult. So I'll just demonstrate myself probably failing it in this case. Yeah. So you can see the timing is actually pretty strict. However, in this next example, I'm going to show you really don't need to worry about that. So the next setup I'm going to show is going to be fully gapless and a double high-low mix-up. And it's also a lot easier to pull off than the previous mix-up I showed off properly. What that's going to be is close slash 66 BRC 248, and then you can get a gapless 862 or 842 after that if they blocked your 248, which is also gapless from your close slash, by the way. So it looks something like this. Remember, he is set to mash 5k, which will show us if this is truly gapless. He'll get counter hit, or I'll get hit. That would be the first part of it, and then you insert your high-low right after. There would be the high option. And there would be the low option. Similar to the other setup though. 248 normally does not give you a combo on hit. Just get 5p 684. Just a little mini combo, I guess. But if they are blue RC'd, you do get a little bit of a combo. Pretty decent chunk of change, I would say. You should note though that I did car cancel there on my close slash 248 on the opposite side, just because actually getting the full close slash 2H afterward can be a little bit distance dependent here. So doing the car cancel helps to get that extra distance, so you land this close slash 2H. So the next mix-up we're going to be talking about is the high-low mix-up that we did in the corner, except we're going to apply that idea anywhere on the screen. Obviously we can't go for OTG 862 and 842 anywhere on the screen, but what we can do is use the same idea in that setup, which is using the recovery of a normal to buffer 862 and 842. And in this case, that's going to be 2p. If you actually time it properly, you can catch all mashing with this setup. And to time this properly so that you're actually catching all mashing is going to be pretty tricky. But nonetheless, to show that it actually does, I'm going to set Soul to 5k after recovery here. So you can see there I managed to counter hit Soul's 5k with 842 as he's waking up. And the same is true with 862. Now the only weakness to this setup and the setup in the corner is that the Soul player can actually backdash on wake up in order to avoid this entirely, if you timed it so that it will melee properly. So you can see that there. However, to counteract this, you can go for with 2p 268. And as you can see, that did in fact catch backdash. It's actually the same in the corner, by the way. Off the OTG pressure, Soul can backdash, but again, you can go for the delay 268 in order to catch it. And you can see if you actually do catch backdash, you get a pretty big reward. So they're going to be quite discouraged from doing that, assuming they even know the counterplay in the first place. The final mix-up I wanted to go over for this video is going to be a quadruple overhead that also has a fuzzy. That is also gapless. It's pretty dumb. And also, this is off of JD, and if you're a Goldlewis player, you probably use this shit all the time, which means that you can kind of go for it neutral. This one's unique in that you don't really have to be in advantage state to go for this mix-up, although you do want to hit your JD fairly close. And what I'm talking about is going to be JD, air dash 66 BRC, in other words, in the air, and then JK, and then fuzzy JK JD or JH JD. I prefer JH JD, but you can do either one. In practice, it looks something like this. And because of the blue RC slowdown, they won't have time to go back to their crouching stance there before you get your instant overhead JH or JK. So that's also really, really hard to block. It's not particularly rewarding though. And finally, there's a lot of room for creativity with Goldlewis as well, but I think these mix-ups are very potent and rewarding in particular. But I mean, people like Gobo go for silly stuff like, you know, something like this. You can get like an ambiguous mix-up, cross-up, all kinds of interesting stuff. There you get a cross-up, and you know, there's room for you to experiment. But nonetheless, I think that covers all of Goldlewis's best mix-ups, in my opinion. that are also not too bad to implement. So if you enjoyed this and you would like to see me performing these war crimes to the nameless soldiers of Celestial, then please check out my Twitch at twitch.tv/me_Lolo. Link in description. That's all from me, Golds.